Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are in the world, whether you in Dubai, whether you in Miami, whether you where I'm from in Kansas City, Missouri, the 816 babies, wherever you are right now, I appreciate you for tuning in for another episode of the Culture Talks podcast with Sis the Kids, CIZZY, and we are back again with another fire guest. I tell y'all every week, I'm gonna come back with the fire guest. And I ain't lied to y'all yet. Truthfulness is the foundation of all human virtues, ladies and gentlemen. So today, to the left of me, if you're watching the video or just in your ears right now, we have another fire guest, and I'm gonna go ahead and let her introduce herself right about now.
Hey, my name is Pauleanna, and I am a millennial woman who has fought for her dreams and won. I think that society is so tied to titles, but I think it's really important to understand who we are beyond them. So that's really important to me. But if I had to formally introduce myself, I am a journalist. I'm currently a senior writer at Forbes and Business Insider. And when I'm not reporting on women in business, I am running a full service ghostwriting agency. And I am a celebrity ghostwriter who helps turn personal stories into powerful brand assets. So I pen books, keynote speeches, and public statements for the world's leaders and doers who are shaping the future.
I love it. And if that wasn't powerful just in that statement, let's go ahead and dive a little bit deeper. I know you kind of covered it right there at the snippet, but if you were to try to describe yourself, like your character, your personality, like you outside of business, how would you describe yourself in, a few short sentences?
I am a girl who is still imaginative, who still has her childlike wonder, who's curious. I am someone who plays chess often. I love brain games. I love to challenge myself. And I just really believe that there's a difference between your job and your life assignment. And for 33 years, I've been really on a quest to figure out what that purpose is. And I don't know, I'm in such a great space right now, I have to say. And so I really feel like the most successful people in the world have not lost their childlike wonder. I feel like they understand that the world is built by dreamers. And so as long as I keep asking why and I just follow my butterflies, I feel like I'll always be in a good position.
I love that. You mentioned two things that I kind of live my life by, and it's like always reminding yourself that there's still a kid inside of you. And once you discover that, and once you tap into that as an adult, like you rediscover a whole new world again. And then you saying, always asking why. Like somebody says no to you. No, I don't want to take you on for this contract. Why? Like, no, I don't think you'd be a good fit for this business. Why? No, I don't think you're the best employee here. Why? And it's not like trying to be annoying. It's really just trying to better yourself by, getting as much feedback as you can, because whether it's critical or whether it's, positive, all feedback can help us learn. So I appreciate you saying that. When you were growing up, did you think that you were going to be doing what you're doing today? Like when you were, matter of fact, what city did you grow up in? And go ahead and start there.
Yeah, for sure. The answer to your first question is yes. I always had big dreams for myself. And I think when we're children, we all have big dreams for ourselves. But as we get older, when we are bombarded with media messaging, we are dealing with teachers and guidance counselors and parents who put a lid on our dreams. And then, we're then told when we enter high school that we need to be a little bit more realistic. And so many teenagers get stuck in that gray area. The second part of your question, I was born and raised in Toronto, Canada, traditional two-parent household. I was taught to play it safe, to color within the lines, never step outside of them. So I have always been, let's say, the rebellious one in my family, simply because I always asked why. Like I just didn't really understand like what could really I really understood because I was very fascinated with the origin stories of other leaders and entrepreneurs, public speakers. And I knew from reading and studying their life trajectory, I knew that success didn't arise from playing it safe ever. And so when my parents and the people around me would encourage me to do that, I don't know, like that really made me feel really misunderstood, made me feel depressed. I've lived with depression and anxiety since I was a kid, and I just didn't really understand. But then I later discovered that oftentimes when people put limits on your life, it's because they are operating in fear, self doubt. They're really afraid of taking the next step. And, they sometimes your parents don't know what they don't know, right? And so I think everyone is entitled to their opinion, but I have every reason to look past it.
Yes, yes. I always tell my siblings, because I'm the baby of the family, right? I'm the baby of 9. Everyone's trying to tell me, what are you doing? Like, why don't you go back to school? Why don't you, go do this? Why don't you go do that? Why didn't you study a trade? I'm like, listen, man, like, I love you guys and I appreciate all your opinions, but I'm only going to really take advice from people who are doing what I want to do in life. Like,
Right.
it's not that I'm shutting you down. I'm going to consider what you have to say, but why would I listen to somebody who has no experience in investing in stocks? No, if that's what I'm interested in, or invest, or starting a trucking company, or
Right.
interviewing entrepreneurs like yourself. Like, if you haven't done that before, or you don't know anything about that, why would I really consider too much of what you have to
Exactly.
say? So,
Mhm.
you know, I love that. And speaking of being like, the I forgot the words you used, but stubborn one of the family,
Yeah.
or so. Do you have any siblings? And if so, are you the youngest, oldest? What was like the environment growing up? I know you said it was a traditional household, but did you have any cousins you were around that influenced what you might have wanted to be when you were growing up? Or yeah, talk about that a little bit.
So I'm the oldest. I have two other siblings. I'm the oldest. And so when you're the oldest, like your parents are very delicate with you because they're experiencing everything for the first time with you. And so nobody around me wanted to be a writer. Like writing is not a popular decision. Like you don't often hear that amongst your friends and your peers. But I was bullied a lot as a kid and I spent a lot of time alone. I used to eat lunch by myself all the time, go for walks by myself. I didn't have a lot of friends. And so when I would spend time alone, I always had a notebook and a pen and I would write about what life would be like outside of the hellhole that I was in.
Mm.
And so that's when things seemed really peaceful and really perfect. And I was like, I knew I wanted that feeling to continue. So it just made sense to me that I would either go into communications or journalism. But when I articulated this to my teachers, to my parents, they told me no, for the mere fact that like I really didn't do well in school, right? At all. And so I failed grade 11 and 12 English. I later dropped out of college. And so like it just wasn't, they just didn't think it was in the cards for me. They didn't think it made sense because I wasn't a great writer. And so well, I shouldn't say that. Traditionally speaking, like, you know what I mean?
Yes, yeah.
Traditionally speaking, I wasn't a great writer. I had a very slow learning curve, and oftentimes when the teacher would speak to me, it was like they're speaking in a foreign language. When I would read the textbook, I had a hard time reading for many years as a kid. When I would read the textbook, I'd have to read it 3, 4, 5 times to digest the information. So me saying that I wanted to be a writer was so left field for everybody. So they discouraged me from taking that path. Um, and so I entered a college program that I ultimately just hated. I just, followed mommy and daddy and what they said. I was a good girl. And then, yeah, like I dropped out my second year and I promised myself that I'd figure this shit out. And I really do think that, you know, I think people need to understand that every successful entrepreneur, executive, artist was once an amateur. Everyone starts at zero.
Yeah.
And so, and you are allowed to hit the reset button as many times as you need to, whenever you need to. And so for me, it was like I dropped out of school, then I hit the reset button. I'm like, I'm going to figure it out. And I exercised critical thinking skills and problem solving skills, which I think honestly, like, a lot of young people today, I think that's like the biggest uh it's really concerning to me. I'll say that because I mentor a million gazillion people. And through having conversation, and I think with the emergence of social media and everything's at our fingertips, no one's willing to like put pen to paper and solve their life issues like a math equation, to really think through like what is the next logical step. And so yeah, like I had no experience. I had no background or traditional training. And so I really had to build everything from the ground up.
Man. And before we jump into that, you spoke a lot about, So, you spoke about failing English 11th, 12th grade. You talked about, dropping out of college. You talked about the social challenges you had growing up and dealing with depression and anxiety. So there's a lot of adversity that you faced, and you're still very young. So can you talk a little bit about how you overcame some of this adversity? I know you shared that, when you were younger, you used to spend time writing, and that felt like that's when you felt most at peace. But are there any other, maybe keys to overcoming adversity that you might want to share with people out there in the world who are facing similar challenges that you faced?
I would never want to change anything, to be honest. Like, it's interesting because when I was in high school, I wanted to be popular. I wanted to be like the cool kid. You know what I mean? Who wants to be picked on, right? Who wants to be
Right.
bullied? But I wouldn't change anything because it helped me develop a backbone. And
Mm,
now as I navigate the world of entrepreneurship, people, you know what I mean, I know how to handle myself when I'm sitting around the table with all white men. I know how to handle myself when I'm negotiating a deal. I know how to handle myself or lead a team. And so I want to say to anyone who's dealing with adversity, it does get better. And that the only way I know how to climb out of any hole I'm in is gradually, one step at a time, right? You got to be patient with yourself. Um, a key factor that helped me a lot was acquiring mentors. So almost immediately when I dropped out of school, I messaged a young woman on Facebook. This was, I mean, we're going back to like 2008, 2009. And I messaged someone on Facebook that I had admired. She had a business, she was fly, she was confident, she had that black girl magic. And, I remember we went out to dinner and she's still my mentor today, right? Going on 10 years. So for me, it was like standing on the shoulders of giants and also asking a lot of questions and not being a victim to analysis paralysis. So I think right now, like, because of Instagram and whatnot, everyone wants to present something that's picture perfect. And so my very first website, my very first blog was so poorly designed, but I was so proud of that shit because it was free and it was the only thing I could afford. And I really do feel like that's just like the essence and the beauty of being a creator. Like everything, you understand that everything's a work in progress. And so I had a free website. It was poorly designed, but I was so proud of it. And every day I was consistent. I gave my heart to it. And I was really passionate about the things that I was writing about. And so I don't let fear paralyze me. I think people are under the impression that successful people are not afraid of anything. We're all afraid of I'm afraid of everything. I'll speak for myself. I'm afraid of everything. I don't let it paralyze me. So in the infancy of my career, of course it was scary to have a blog at the time because it was a very new thing. Putting yourself out there, putting your work out there. But for me, like I wanted everything that was on the other side of my fear so much more that like I didn't care what I had to go through to get it. So I just really stayed the course.
I love it. I love it. And I believe from what I read up on the lovely lady here is that you did have a corporate position before you moved into entrepreneurship full time. So could you start there on once you dropped out, what you were doing for work, and then how you transitioned out of that into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, sure. So I was a executive assistant to presidents and CEOs, various organizations over the course of 10 years. It was by far, and I didn't realize this early on in my career. I learned later on, I guess I had a special appreciation for it because I then realized that it was literally one of the best positions in the company. To be an assistant to anyone, especially CEOs and presidents, I mean, I had a bird's eye view of the entire organization. I was able to ask questions. I learned how to read sales reports. I learned, how they strategized in 3 hour long meetings. Um, I was privy to a lot of confidential information. And I really do think that working a 9 to 5 was critical for me to be successful in my own business. And I want to tell anyone who's complaining about their 9 to 5 to shut the fuck up because it just doesn't, to me, like you can't, in order to operate $1 million company, you need to study how one is run. And what better way to really do that than to work for an organization. So that means you should, I'll say what I did. My suggestion is to raise your hand whenever you can. Take on projects outside of your scope of work, outside of your title, right? Volunteer for committees and clubs. I also did informational interviews with every head of department. So the head of marketing, the head of sales, the head of HR, et cetera, et cetera. And I sat down with them for 10, 20 minutes and just asked them questions about their role, their function, their responsibility. You know what I mean? In the first few years of your company, you wear every hat. So why not really tap into that? So for me, it just made sense. And of course it sucked. And there were some times where I was crying on the bathroom floor and things were really frustrating. But that's just, again, going back to what I said earlier, I studied the origin stories of so many entrepreneurs prior that I was like I knew it was just literally the thing that I had to do in order to get to where I wanted to be. So you just suck that shit up. Like, I think I know it's difficult, especially now, with bosses being micromanagers because everyone's working from home, but you just got to do what you got to do so that you can do what you want to do. And that's how I really looked at it.
I love that. And I needed that myself because I struggle with that a lot, especially just like, I'm never going to hate on the 9-to-5ers, but like I always like when I'm working, I'm just like, like I just want to be doing what I want to do. Like, I don't like this guy telling me that I can't, get off work on my sister's birthday. Like, I'm just like, I get so frustrated.
But you have to get that frustration should turn into motivation at some point. Right? Like I was just as mad too. I mean, I was, listen, corporate, they don't care about you. You know what I mean? But like, I think it's just a mindset shift that everyone needs to experience. The number on your corporate contract when you got that position, that is what they can afford. It doesn't amount to your true value. Right? And so for me, it was just a matter of just like shifting I'm like, listen, I consider this getting paid to come to business school every day. So I'm going to literally milk all the resources I can. I'm going to ask all the questions I can. I'm going to make all these executives teach me what these numbers, these acronyms, you know what I mean? Like all, these reports. Like I'm going to learn everything so I can take these skills and transfer them into my business. And that's exactly what I did. I quit my job January 2019. And 2018, I built a 6-figure company from my cubicle. And then I decided to leave.
Wow. And so first off, you've dropped like so many like quick gems, like boom, like boom, like boom. So I hope everyone that's listening to this podcast is listening clearly. If not, run it back and make sure you have a notebook out and a pencil, because it's mandatory. This is probably one of the better interviews. Not to say that any of my past guests were amazing, but this is probably one of the better interviews you're going to get. And on top of that, please, if you can't listen to this full episode right now, go to her Instagram right now and go watch her. Is it Bomb Life?
Mm-hmm.
Bomb Life highlights. I promise you will pull a lot of gems. But continuing forward, so 2018, how are you building a business from your cubicle? There's a lot of people who love to come up with there's a lot of people who love to come up with excuses about, and I'm not gonna lie, I've been one of them too. So like, there's a lot of people who love to come up with excuses like, I'm working this job, I don't have time. So how are you figuring out, what's stimulating your brain? Like, oh, I could be doing this when I'm not at work, or I could be doing this in my free time at work. Like, what stimulates that, and what were you doing? And just kind of talk about how you built that.
I would use my travel time to and from work to catch up on my assignments. I went into the office every day at 6 a.m. Now that's something that like most people are just not going to do, but I'm not most people. So I would go into the office every day at 6 a.m. And sometimes that meant waking up at 4. And I would work on my shit till about 8 or 9 o'clock. And then I would clock in. And then on my lunch breaks, like I never took lunch ever. I always used my lunch break to work on my articles, work on a public speaking gig, have a meeting, I'd book a boardroom. Now, whenever I do my interviews, it's very important. See, I went into each one of my jobs at my salary cap. Money was not a main driver for me. I needed environments that were millennial driven. I wanted to work for people who could be my mentors. I wanted unlimited vacation, so 3 weeks and above. There are so many other factors that were important. I needed to work in a space that, how some of these new age offices, they're like open concept and everyone can see your computer. I could not do that, because if I'm going to run a company, I can't have everyone in my business. So that's why I said I had the old school cubicles. Like I was just very selective where I wanted to work. Like I said, I went in like at my salary cap, so money wasn't important to me. So all these other factors were critical. So I just leveraged my time. You work the 9 to 5, you come home, you work 6 to midnight. I did that every single day for many, 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 many years. Tired as fuck, just drained. I cried a lot, but I just knew I was building something. I knew I was building something. And so like you just have to be patient. I don't know what to say. I think time management, also having systems in your business, and then the other thing is just like applying what you learned. I think so many people are addicted to going to 18 different conferences a year, listening to 100 podcast episodes, and they never really apply what they learned. Like the difference between successful people and average ones is application. So like I just made sure that I didn't just like sit on information. I applied it. And yeah, I think the biggest thing is just managing time. I think that's the biggest thing that people struggle with. So you just really have to make sure you don't misuse the hours of each day.
I love that. And speaking of 100 podcasts, and then and what you said right there, it's like I was just listening to a podcast like literally 30 minutes ago, and the gentleman asked, he's like, so he said the same thing. People just need to make use of their time. And then he was like, well, how do you like take care of your time a little bit better? He's like, value it. He's like,
Yeah. Oh my God, yes.
And that's all he said. He left it right there. And the dude was like, anything else? He's like, no. He's like, value your time. He's
Right.
like, as soon as you do that, then you'll level up little by little. But people don't value their time as much as they think they do. That hour you spend, on Netflix, or that hour that you spend
it
here
all
or
adds
there.
up.
How valuable is your time truly to you, and your freedom? Because that's, I guess, a lot of time what people are working towards, and not everybody, but a lot of time people are working towards their freedom and their legacy. How important, how much do you value that? If you don't value it enough, then you're going to spend a lot of time on Netflix in your free time. You're not going to go into work an hour or two early to get some stuff done. You're not going to stay up from 6 to 12 after you just worked a hard ass day at your corporate job and got yelled at. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're not going to do that if you don't value it. So that's powerful. I love that. So you talked at the beginning of the episode about what you do, but can you talk about maybe your first paid, situation, like, not for your corporate job, but for your first paid situation, and how did you maybe, I guess, negotiate that deal, or how did that come into fruition, if you can remember?
Sure. So first paid writing job ever was in 2011. I think it was like December 2011. I still have the check laminated in my bedroom wall. It was for $450. So here's the thing. I met my mentor. I dropped out of school 2008, met my mentor 2009, started my blog 2010. A year later, my mentor, unbeknownst to me, she had connections in the journalism industry. She called me and she said, hey, I think I have an opportunity you'd like. And she then hooked me up with an interview at a publishing house in Toronto. The publishing house looked at my blog and hired me just based off my consistency and my passion. So I was writing for every major newspaper across the country for 4 years. So, early 20s, young journalist. And it just goes to show you just don't know who's watching, what power they hold. So before, you can't put so much emphasis on vanity metrics, because honestly, for the first year of my blog, I probably had like 12 views a month. Like, I don't even fucking know, but nobody knew who I was. I didn't have a name for myself. I didn't have a brand. So I imagine it was little to no views. But you know what? Out of those 12 views, one person was watching and wanted to give me a shot. So that's the first thing I want to say. In terms of as my career, bloomed and blossomed, I mean, my father's Jamaican. He has multiple hustles, as you can imagine. So like, I've always been making money. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I'll always be okay because I know how to sell myself. So that was my first check ever. And then from there, actually in my bedroom, I have the check. And then I have a piece of paper. And on the paper, it says, there's always more where that came from. I'm a big believer in speaking things into existence. I'm a big believer in raising your vibration. You know what I mean? Like, that's important to me. So like, that's a reminder of humble beginnings. And then from there, it's kind of spiraled into so many different things: public speaking, My writing career has just, has blown up. I'm a journalist. I'm a 2-time author. I was a songwriter at some point. I mentor. I do a lot of consulting work. So things have just like evolved over time. But I will never forget. But again, I will never forget the first check I ever got for my art, because so many people said that it would never happen.
I love that. I love that. And there's so many. It's funny because I knew like before this interview, I was like, I'm gonna have like 1,000 more questions than I can actually ask. But I think one of the questions I want to ask, just because it's something people hear about a lot, but I don't think a lot of people know what it is. So can you kind of define, at least in your career field, what exactly what consulting looks like, and maybe yeah, just kind of explain what consulting looks like. A lot of people are like, I consult for this person, I consult for these companies, but like, what the hell does that mean for those who
What
don't
is
know?
consulting? That's so funny. So consulting is, okay, when you have built your reputation, when you have established yourself as a thought leader, when you have years of expertise, people will then hire you as a consultant to advise them on their business structure, to advise them on their business practices, advise them on building an effective team, making key decisions, advise them on key brand partnerships. So I get looped into conversations with companies who, I don't want to say who are insecure, but who are indecisive and would like to have an expert opinion on whether they should go left or right, pick one or two, black or blue, right? So that's what consulting work is. It's an ongoing brainstorming session, it's a mastermind, it's when people hire you to lend your expertise because you have the experience to back your shit up.
I love that. I love that. And being that 2020 happened and COVID-19 happened, I know that you were doing a lot of traveling, but how did that transition? How did work transition for you during COVID, pandemic
Yeah.
shutdown? Like, did consultations shift to Zoom? Did mentoring and everything just shift to Zoom or Google? Like, what? How did your business change once the pandemic hit?
So my business changed. Uh, so my main jam is ghostwriting, and my business changed because, I wouldn't say changed, it increased because the world was in chaos. And when the world is in chaos, my business thrives. It's a harsh reality because a lot of CEOs, a lot of senior level executives, founders, Black Hollywood, et cetera, they want a communications advisor to help them with their messaging, their public statements, their speaking notes if they appear on CNN, right? They want help with, that keynote that they need to deliver. And so 2020 was one hell of a year for my team. It was insanity. We had no life. We had to revisit some of the harsh realities every single time we had to uh, pen a piece of content. And so, yeah, everything just, I mean, yeah, I was used to being on a plane every other week. I went from that to just sitting my ass down, being in the house and doing everything from Zoom. But yeah, 2020 was a wild year. It was exciting. Every single day I was getting phone calls left and right from really interesting individuals. But I'm just really happy that, I didn't even know when I started the business that I created a business that was recession proof, essentially. And so we didn't take a hit, and I'm really thankful that we were in that position.
Lovely, lovely. And you mentioned your team. So can you maybe give some key insights on what you think are necessary qualities that you need to look for when you're building out a team as a CEO or as an owner of a company, or just maybe maybe you're leading a team inside of your corporate position. Can you give some key, what do you
Yeah.
look for in somebody when you're building out a team?
Well, I think before you lead a team, you have to have enough self awareness to understand whether or not you are capable of even leading, right? And I think 2020 made a lot of founders, CEOs, senior level executives, and made us question ourselves. Can we be compassionate leaders? What's more important than the bottom line? Right? What's the mental health status of the people that report to us? And so I went back to school. I took a leadership program at Yale University so I could relearn some things or unlearn some things, I'll say. And because I come from a history of monster bosses, I come from a history of bosses screaming their head off at me, making me cry, scaring me into perfection. When you're an assistant to a president of a Fortune 500 company, there is no room for error. So I come from a history of just like scare tactics. And so I could feel myself slowly turning into that. And so I had to reset. So yeah, so I think part of having a great team starts with the leadership. Number one. Number two, um, I mean, I don't have high turnover. I don't have high turnover. Everyone has been with my team forever. And I think it's because we have a great company culture. I have an open door policy. Um, I have people on my team who are smarter than me, who bring, different things to the table, who are the best at what they do. Um, and I love that I foster training. So I encourage my team to pick any course of their choosing. I fund up to 75% of their education. And I encourage them to, I always ask them, what's the larger picture for your life? And how does your work at the company fit into that? Because I want to know what else they want to do beyond writer's block. I want to know what other goals they have for themselves and how can I help, either through a recommendation letter, either through a phone call or an introduction. Do I need to help you with an opportunity or open a door? Right. So for me, that's most important. And I think that's why people stay because I care beyond the bottom line.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And I do want to say thank you again. I always got to say thank you in the midst of gems being dropped and just appreciating the conversation. So thank you for your time today. Listeners, make sure you are listening closely, writing notes and rewinding if you hear something fire. A lot of times I feel like people hear a podcast or watch a video and they're like, oh, that was fire. And then they just keep watching. I'm like, bro, like go back and write that down. Write that down because
Right.
you will forget. I promise you, you will forget. So write it down. I do have a few questions about things that you've said. Like I told
Okay.
you at the beginning of the podcast, I really enjoy those highlights.
Yeah.
So these are some key things that stood out that I just had further questions on. So, and one of the highlights you mentioned zero mindset. So what's your new zero mindset? And you talking about 10K is your new zero, like for your bank account. A lot of people are like,
Yeah. That's actually increased quite a bit.
ooh, I love it. So I love it. I love it. I love it. So can you
Yeah.
kind of talk about that mindset?
Yeah. So, I mean, I learned that from my parents. Zero should never be zero. If you raise the bar, then you're never going to have to worry. I mean, of course, as an entrepreneur, there'll be some moments where you may not even know how you're going to make payroll. But if you set a new zero limit, it kind of like just provides a cushion, right? So, zero could be 10K, it could be 500, it could be 50K, but just do what you feel like is comfortable for you and do not go under it. I mean, I have friends who have six figures in their bank account, but they will still tell you they're broke, right? They'll still tell you that they're on a financial diet. They'll still decline dinner invitations, right? So because they don't want to go under their zero, right? So I really do think that's important. Money mindset is important.
I love that because when I heard that when I was watching the highlights, I was like, damn, like I was like, damn, because not in any arrogant way, but at least in my community of like friends and stuff, I'm seen as the person, that they come to ask questions about certain things, or that
Mhm.
comes with the motivation and the inspiration and the vibes. And when I heard that, I was like, damn, I need to switch up my whole entire mindset. I was like, I'm only denying dinner invites when I'm under $15. I'm like, oh, hold up, let me switch my
Okay.
whole setup up. So I thought it was fire when you said that. Another thing that you mentioned, and I thought it was powerful, especially after you mentioned, dealing with depression, anxiety growing up. You said feelings are not facts and you won't let them control you. So maybe just double down on that a little bit. Again, these are just things that I thought were fire that stood out, but I just wanted to hear your a little bit more insights on.
Yeah, so that's something I remind myself because I'm a very sensitive person. I'm very emotional as well. So it really helps me to ground myself when I tell myself that feelings are not facts, right? And my partner always reminds me, um, you know, what are the facts, right? And we go over them. If we're looking at a particular situation, we go over what we know is for sure, right? And then we dismiss everything else. As an entrepreneur, you are going to cry every once in a while. You're going to get in your emotions. But as long as you don't stay there, right? Like I said, climb out of the hole gradually. So if you go over what are the facts, what do I know for sure, it can equip you to make a better decision moving forward.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Again, just quick gems. I love quick gems. There's long gems. There's quick gems. There's small gems, and I'm just like, I like this. See, podcasting is really a selfish thing. Let me tell you, because look, you get on, you get to have crazy conversations with people. You get to learn. You get to pick gems from it, and then you can run back and listen to it. And then you also get to share the value with the world. So anybody out there listening, please start a podcast. I'm telling you. So you mentioned that you print out bios when you go into conversations with other, businessmen, businesswomen, or when you go into a meeting, you print out bios on these individuals. Can you talk about what exactly you mean by that? And then how that's helped you out when you go into meetings with people, when you go to conversate with people?
Yes. So I never go into a meeting unprepared. I think it's very irresponsible. I at least will check out, at the very least, I'll check out someone's social media to see what's going on in their life. But it's great to print out their LinkedIn profile or their bio so you can also see their accomplishments, because it better equips you to ask smarter questions. I do think there is such thing as dumb questions, and people will say that there isn't, but there is, and maybe that's the journalist in me. Um, it's interesting because like I get asked to people want to meet with me all the time, young people, whatever, people that I mentor, etc. And I always challenge them to and the thing is like, so I'll use you as an example actually, right? You combed through my social media, right? And you did your research on me so that you could come to me with smart, well thought of questions. Whereas I find that people don't do the background research to put themselves in a great position. I can't tell you how many meetings I've had with high profile individuals. And because I asked great questions, I held their attention. We extended the meeting. I might have had 10 minutes at the start. They gave me half an hour, or they gave me the opportunity, or they connected me with a colleague because I knew things about them that they didn't even think I would even look into.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I say I love it a lot. And that's because I do. So we still have a few more serious questions, but I want to detract for a little bit, and I want to ask you, what are some fun things you appreciate about growing up in Toronto? I know that Toronto's just came on the scene as a poppin' city over the past 10 years because of Drake and some of these artists, but what have you appreciated about it? What have you enjoyed about it growing up there?
It's very clean. The people are polite. We have free healthcare. Honestly, we have it very, very good here in Toronto, Canada. Um, but I will say this: one of my favorite pastors, Bishop T.D. Jakes, he says you will not go further than you think, and so I find that people in Toronto often just stay there. Even though it's a metropolitan city, we call ourselves a melting pot. There's a lot of opportunity. I knew that opportunities, there were opportunities beyond borders. And so I actually spent a great deal of my time in New York and LA. And I do a great deal of my business in the States. And so Toronto's great, but I do feel like we can get very comfortable. And so for me, it was very important. In my early 20s, I would skip paying my phone bill so I could afford flights, right? I would sleep at the airport. I would crash on couches, and I would go to New York, and I go to DC, and go to LA, and go to Atlanta, and just meet with strangers, set up meetings from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Right. And so, like, in my 20s, I did, I explored, I had adventure. I called someone 100 times until they would take a meeting with me, all those things. And so, in Toronto, like I said, we have it very good. So it's easy to get comfortable. So I challenged myself to explore new environments so I could expand my future business, right? Because I'm in my early 20s, my future business. So and fast forward today, I'm 33. I have fantastic, like, my contact list is stupid. You know what I mean? Like, anyone I need to know, I know, or if there's like a few people, between us, I can get the contact. So like, being intentional with my networking strategy in my 20s was really important.
And you saying that helps me transition into my next question, which is, if I can't build with you, or if I can't chill with you, I can't build
Can't
with
build
you.
with
So,
you.
so
Yeah.
can you kind of talk about, maybe what you look for in relationships, especially when you're trying to build with, other people in the same field as you? I know you mentioned in one of the highlights I was watching that you don't compete with other people in your field. You try to grow with them. You try to build with them. So can you maybe just touch on the importance of that? Because I feel like a lot of people overlook that. They're like, they kind of look at it the opposite way. If I can't build with you, I can't chill with you.
Um, so I mean, I'm competitive by nature. I was an athlete for a greater portion of my childhood. So for me, you know, as much as I want to collaborate, but I also want to be the best of what we do. So if we are collaborating, we're giving 100%, right? We're going through lengths to make sure that like we're getting the work done. So for me, I always have my eyes open. I feel like when you are moving into the direction of your dreams, books will fly off the shelves, people will come into your life, you will attract everything that you need to succeed. But people miss the clues because they're too fucking distracted. And so I'm just very aware of the people around me. And so, like, again, when you study individuals, when you see clues, like, look deeper into it, because then you may find out that this person could be a really great partner, collaborator, an ally, right? And so for me, I stay curious. And so I just, when I'm scrolling on social media, it's not just to double tap, it's also to go into people's DMs. I'll find their email, I'll email them and set up a meeting. So like I just feel like having a proactive approach is really important. And yeah, everyone in my life I build with in some capacity.
I love it. I love it. And from the outside looking in, even for me, just, looking at your Instagram page, or for people who listen to this podcast and you saying, like, for example, you saying your new 10K is way higher than that, just different things. People can make assumptions that money is success, or this is success. How do you for yourself define success? Like, what does that mean to you? So,
Yeah.
because some people have a understanding of success that they apply to everybody they see in the world. So for you
Right.
and the listeners, can you share what success means to you?
Yeah, success is having the courage to pursue your dreams and giving more than what you take from this world.
Giving more than what you take. And how do you do that? How are you of service? Like, how do you feel like you can be of service on a daily basis? I know it could be through your work, but do you feel like it's through your work, or are there other ways that you strive to be of service to humanity?
I have a mentorship program that I've been running since 2015. I've mentored well over 200 women in 11 countries. They all have my phone number. We talk all the time. We have a great relationship, a great online community, and so mentorship is probably the greatest contribution that I can make with my life. In the last 2 years, I've taken volunteer trips to Australia and Ghana, West Africa. And so I will continue to lend my time wherever I can to causes that are important to me. So for me, I mean, I'm doing my small part and I just want to encourage other people to do theirs.
Amazing. And if we all lay a brick down, brick by brick is how we build society. A lot of people talk about how we're on the edge of, destruction or the world
Yeah.
falling. And I can understand that. But what I always tell people is, if you're a part of the change, what you can do is you can lay your brick, and not, your brick's not going to hold up the entire world. But just as long as you encourage people and you're setting an example, and everyone is trying to contribute to lay a brick, when the world does fall, at least it falls on the foundation that it can build from.
Oh, I like
Instead of
that.
just
Yeah.
falling on just no bricks at all and having to rebuild from the bottom up. So if there's a foundation that we can set for the world to fall on when these terrible things happen, which are
Yeah.
assumed to happen, whatever it is, at least we're prepared to we have a head start. And it starts with you, even in these tough times and these tests and difficulties. It starts as us, as a community, as a collective, giving back. Providing information for communities, providing
Right.
love, providing a shoulder for people to lean on when they're struggling with mental health or when they're struggling with different issues. So, we can all do our part little by little. So I love it.
Yes.
I love it. I'm gonna ask you two more questions. I'm gonna let you slide because I know,
Okay.
it's later nighttime over there. I think you guys are ahead
Yes.
of time. So maybe let's see, which one do I want to ask you? I'm going to ask you one off top for the people who are trying to grow their communities online. Do you have any tips for maybe speak directly to actually, yes, what are some ways that you can grow a community online?
So my simplest advice is just to share stories from your life. Like, so for instance, a few days ago, I can't remember what day, but a few days ago, I shared a viral tweet. And I shared it on Instagram as well. And it talked about how I met my recent partner. And, it did relatively well online. Okay. But that was just a slice of what's going on in my life right now. I think if you just stick to what you know, if you like for instance, every day I write down in my journal, I'm not doing like diary entries, but I do some bullets. What happened to me today? What am I grateful for? And I use those as I build on those in my captions. Just stick to what you know. Talk about the shit that happens in your life. And for those of you who are probably saying, but nothing happens to me, nothing, no one's going to care, you would be very, very, very surprised. I met my partner on an app on Clubhouse. I wrote about it in a tweet that went viral. Then I wrote about it on Instagram, went viral. Who would have thought? But because of the pandemic, because people are craving hugs and affection, right? It did well because it gave people hope, right? So you don't know who you're going to touch with your story. Maybe you didn't find love, cool, but maybe you can offer insight. Maybe you can educate people on a project you're working on. Maybe you can share your perspective on something that's happening in your community, in your industry, or the world at large. Tell stories and work on your storytelling skills, and people will be attracted to that.
I love it. Constantly and consistently be authentic and tell stories, and over time the community will come. And just be patient.
Exactly.
One of my favorite things that Gary Vaynerchuk said was, something that I heard while I was doing these podcasts. Is I've been doing these podcasts for about 2 years now, and like super consistently the past year. But it feels like I'm hustling, but like, man, the views aren't going up. Man, the community's not going up as fast as I want it to go. And sometimes you can beat yourself up. But the reality is, Gary said it's way better to just keep going instead of quitting at episode 199 when you could have went up at 215.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
And
I
being
love that.
patient.
I
And the
love
thing
that.
is, it's not about the numbers though, right? Because remember, you don't know who's watching, what power they hold, right? So for me, I want quality following. I want a quality following rather than like a large following.
Yeah, and I think like, especially for individuals like you, and then for the type of content that I post, and for people who are just trying to help the world, it goes back to the same statement that you said. You never know who's watching. And what I always tell people, like, my siblings, when they're like, man, my views aren't going up, I'm like, man, it doesn't really matter. Because look, just as long as you're spreading a positive message, just as long as you're spreading love, just as long as you're providing information, whether one person heard it or a million, all that matters is that you affect one heart. You know what I'm saying? Just that you have a positive effect on one heart, and that can have a triple effect that you know nothing about. A lot of people like end up being successful because they heard one story that this guy told, but he was told that story by somebody 50 years ago who, like, maybe wasn't quote unquote nobody. Maybe he was a baker. Like, you never know. But the influence trickles down like a domino effect. So always just value the information you're putting out there, and make sure that it's with purpose, it's with pure intention.
Exactly.
My final question for you, final bonus question is, it's your last day here on earth. You're 115. You lived out your full life that you wanted to live. You did exactly what you wanted to do. You left a legacy, but the legacy, all the books you've written, all the documentaries that are put out about you, all the articles put out about you, have to leave with you to the next, wherever we go after we pass away. But your great grandkids are sitting in front of you, and you have to leave them with one piece of advice on how to live life. What are you going to tell them?
Do your best and F the rest.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, I'm writing that down, ladies and gentlemen. Do the best and F the rest. Like that. And with that being said, can you please leave the people here that listen to this episode or watch this episode tomorrow, the next day, the next year, the next 15 years, where they can find you on social and how they can support you and your brand?
Yeah, sure. So, Pauleanna Reid on all social platforms, pauleannareid.com, thewritersblock.com, newgirlontheblock.com. Those are my companies. And just, yeah, keep the lines of communication open, stay in touch. My DMs are open, emails open. I'm actually very easily accessible. So I look forward to saying hello. And thank you so much for this interview. It was fantastic.
Absolutely. I got one more goodbye to say to you after I end this episode. Just give me a second. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning into the Culture Talks podcast, episode 9 of season 7, I believe. Make sure you leave a 5-star review and a comment, as that is the only way we can grow. And with that being said, we are out of here. Salud.